much for that warm welcome. You may please be seated. My name is Aidan Hunter, and today I'm here to talk to you about AIM. AIM is the adoption of Inuit and Métis children. So, the adoption of the Indian and Métis program, or AIM for short, is a program set up to find children from the Indigenous communities homes to have a better life and live a normal life. Funded by the Canadian government and the provinces of Saskatchewan, the adoption of Indian and Métis project started promoting the adoption of First Nations children by middle-class white families in 1967. It was started by Otto Driedger, who later became Director of Child Welfare for Saskatchewan, and Frank Dornstadter. The children who are in the AIM program are able to get away from whatever past they had and start a new life. There can be some negative effects of AIM, like losing all of your culture and traditions, and you can see the children being separated from their families. Being a child adopted in the AIM program can be hard at first, to take in new rituals and traditions from new families that the children aren't necessarily used to. The podcast Finding Cleo, episodes 1 and 2, focuses on the topic of Indigenous children and going through AIM and adoption. It follows a Cree family search for their missing sister, Cleopatra, also known as Cleo. They try to figure out why her and her 5 other siblings were taken into government custody. In episode 2, The Eyes That Haunt Me. Some of the obstacles that Christine has been facing with government agencies to find answers about Cleo were that agencies would only give her the information to the biological siblings and not the parents. Christine does not have Cleo's date of birth, information about where Cleo was adopted from, or anything else. The theory was that Cleo was in New Jersey. The employee from the state of New Jersey was very unsympathetic. She also sounded bored and didn't understand why Christine wanted to know so much about Cleo if she was already dead. This is showing how families would get separated through adoption and wouldn't know where their families had gone or where they were now. And it was hard to find information on lost loved ones, and people were not so helpful in the search. There are many different effects of Aboriginal children adopted and brought up in non-Aboriginal families with different races and ethnicities. We're going to be looking at different stories of Aboriginal adults who as children were raised in non-Aboriginal families. Studies that look at the lives and experiences of children raised in cultures outside of their racial and cultural heritage say they emphasize concerns regarding general psychological adjustment, racial identity, development, and social competence. Some children adapt and learn to fit in better than others, but some still seem to stick to not fit in during their childhood. In Canada, it is well known and accepted that the Aboriginal communities have faced discrimination in the past, along with prejudice for centuries, including the residential school system and the Indian Act. This made the Aboriginal children going through adoption targeted against their race and discriminated against. This raises concerns that identify difficulties, maybe problems in at least some transracial adopted homes. Unfortunately, the effect that racial identity has on adjustment remains unclear for all racial groupings because the relationship between these two variables is typically not examined in transitional adoption studies. Some Aboriginal children that grew up in and were adopted by non-Aboriginal families often struggle with finding their identity, and this also leads and is directed to experiences of racial and cultural oppression. Current adoption for Indigenous children and foster care is still around and well. There are many different information sites and different processes used to maintain the child's religion and identity. Indigenous communities have certain adoption committees or agencies which work at keeping them connected with their extended family and maintain a sense of community. There are different programs such as the infant, child, or teen, or international different divisions of adoption for different preferences. Here are 2 options to adopt an infant or child in BC. You can adopt through the Ministry of Children and Family Development, or MCFD, or BC's licensed adoption agencies. These are just examples of adoption of Indigenous children in BC. There are so many different options and varieties out there. The website states that Indigenous parents wishing to adopt an Indigenous child should expect additional programs and approval steps to adopt an Indigenous child. Prospective adoptive parents may be required to complete a cultural education training program and participate in certain areas of a cultural plan, so the children can remain in touch with their identity and religion in their community. At first, the adoption process may seem overwhelming when there are so many steps to follow. Most routes are standardized and usually are very predictable. Your process depends on the program that you choose. When you get a phone call from your adoption representative for a potential placement, you must apply all that you've learned throughout your proposal process. Ensure that the placement is right for your family. Once you accept the proposal, the placement process timeline varies depending on the location and age of your child. That is a look through adoption of Indigenous children in Canada, and even in a certain place like BC. Looking back at all the research and facts going into AIM, or the adoption of the Indigenous and Métis children, there are so many ups and downs, and it could be a difficult and confusing process at times. And some benefits are that these children get whole new lives. They get a whole new future, and they can get away from whatever was in their past. Anything stopping them to be who they want is behind them, and they have a whole future ahead of them. Thank you.
Cool.
You guys are too kind. This is too much. Thank you so much. Thank you.